Keep your hands and head inside the vehicle at all times. Buckle your seatbelts, check your mirrors, sit on back and relax. It's lights out and away we go for the Tall and Short of It podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tall and Short of It podcast, coming to you live from a flying pirate ship. I'm your host, Justin.
And I'm Aaron. Welcome back, everyone, for another episode of the podcast. We are back this week with a lot of good F1 chit-chat to talk about, a little bit of Magic the Gathering, some League of Legends playoff expectations, and more. Justin, good to see you, my friend. How's your week been? How you doing?
Yeah, good to see you too, man. Excited to excited to talk about the Grand Prix. Looking forward to some of the playoffs. But yeah, let me give you a little bit about my week here. So I've been having some, I'll just say shoulder inflammation that is, being at the forefront of my brain, and being an aware individual. I know where it's coming from. I've been working on my seated posture when working at my desk. With my ergonomic chair, it's definitely improved. I've come up and am more centered, where previously, I know I've talked, I used to have this outward rotation to my arms and my shoulders. I've kind of all brought it to the middle, but this shoulder inflammation, it's coming from, I would have my armrest up to match the height of my desk and to get to make everything fit. So what I did, sir, I took the wheels off the bottom of my desk, dropped it down it's a solid 2.5 inches lower. Now my shoulders are dropped and in an ergonomic position when at rest, and where my hands would be on my WASDs, my right hand on my mouse. It's perfectly comfortable, and I'm just my shoulders are in a relaxed position now, and okay. I'm seated perfectly comfortable. So that's my seat here for the week, where I've been kind of thinking about this issue, what we can do. And so my seat is here, looking forward to kind of relief from the shoulders in my gaming positions.
Very nice. It's tough. I feel like the shoulders are a tough one to figure out, because, and I mean, you have the professional perspective, but I know that growing up running, my dad, he ran cross country through college, ran marathons, half marathons, all sorts of good stuff. But during cross country races for me, one thing he would remind me a lot about was to drop my shoulders and let them be relaxed, because you'll get up tight with your shoulders in that running. And then I don't know, that I imagine that kind of can't help with your breathing or just your arm movement in general. But I know that the shoulders were always something that he would remind me to focus on when I was running.
Yeah, I think it's a really important aspect of any training, because you're right, at the highest level, when you're mid-maxing, some of those muscular restrictions that you would develop, I think they would end up limiting your lung capacity and range of motion to a significant degree in that way. So yeah, always good to be mindful of the shoulders. So that's my seed here for the week. My thorn, I've been thinking about just thorns in general. I'll give you a real small. Neil Brennan had a new hour on Netflix. It's called Blocks. Couple of moments, very funny. Overall, just pretty introspective, and just thinking about life at the age that he is now. That got me thinking about just blocks in general in life. So I've been listening to some conversations between people that are discussing kind of their issues and their blocks in life and strategies that they use to overcome it. So I think that's really strong when you can hear people talking about some of the same things that you go through as an individual, and realize oh man, we are all human. Hearing what they've done to help it is just super useful. And then you can find ways to kind of hopefully include that in your life. So I think that's been really strong for me lately, is just hearing about some other people's thorns, and what they do to help. It's been illuminating.
Gotcha. Nice. I think, yeah, there's a lot you can glean from other people's experience. I think
big time.
It's one of those for some things, like, you can learn from other people's mistakes in a way, but then there's also, of course, the other side of it where there's like some things that you learn better by experiencing.
Oh yeah, for
But
sure.
there's a ton of information, like especially strategies for like working through problems and whatnot that you can get from something like that. So that's pretty cool.
Super useful. And then my rows here, just real short. I've got a client who has been coming in for our stretching protocols recently, and we've been doing it at a pretty good clip, I would say, and getting all of those just like repetitions has allowed me to like really kind of solidify my plan. I've got it like pretty memorized where I'm not kind of like self-checking. It's just kind of I've got it down to kind of a process, and then in that I can kind of freestyle a little bit, which is cool, where like if as I see changes or no differences, we can kind of change it up. So I've been really pleased with how the stretching has been going. But that's been my week here, sir. How have you been? Give me your rose, thorn, and seed here.
Yeah, I'll start out with my thorn because it's just I'll try to keep it short, but it's like uh kind of more of a bummer.
Sure.
But
Well, give it to me.
so over the end of last week, I noticed this like person at the property that I work at and all, like in the common areas and all. I didn't recognize them as a resident, but of course I have like people that I have like people who are staying short term that have like kids and stuff, and they're like, I was thinking like late teens, early 20s ish age kind of thing, but looking a little vagrant ish.
Gotcha.
So I was like, okay, they're hanging right around the lobby. They weren't bothering anyone. Our property is not in an area that you would get like typical random foot traffic. There's not good sidewalks even like coming to our property and all. So I was like, this person has to like live here. This is just kind of weird. Like, I haven't seen them at all. All of a sudden they're like in the lobby for X amount of time. But then we started getting complaints from residents that this person was like sleeping in the lobby. And I'm like, okay, like this is weird. But then I was able to verify it on our cameras and with our key fob system that they had a key fob to the community. I kind of nailed down like where they belonged and everything.
That's cool.
Yeah, but so I guess the bummer part was it kind of came to a head. We had talked to the person, be like, hey, you can't sleep in like the lobby, like you gotta sleep at your apartment. And then it still has continued happening. So
So like no naps.
no, like overnight sleeping.
Okay, gotcha.
Like our maintenance got an emergency call at 4 a.m. and this person's like chilling in the lobby.
Okay, gotcha. I understand.
Yeah, so come to find out basically that so this person is transitioning between previous gender and all.
Okay.
And their parents, one of which lives at our property, have essentially disowned them and don't like let them be in the home essentially. And the person's an adult, they're like early 20s. But yeah, I'm like, it really really like kills me inside. And it's been bothering me all day cuz I'm like, this person is just like trying to figure out life like anybody else.
Right.
And I can't imagine bringing someone into this world without them asking and then just so harshly judging them that you are like like kicking them out basically and just don't want to be a part. Like it just blows my mind. It makes me really sad. And so I just like feel really bad for the situation. I don't know how exactly it's going to turn out. We've had like multiple conversations. My property manager, one of her relatives is a therapist, so they gave her some resources for like LGBTQ plus like resources for housing and like assistance and things like that. And so she gave that to the person. But I just feel really bad about it, and it sucks because I just can't comprehend how a parent could just like do that just because of like someone trying to be who they are. Not like, I can understand cutting someone off because of toxicity. Like every interaction I've had with this person in passing, in like talking to them, whatnot, super polite, super soft spoken, just like seems like just not like a bad person at all. And I'm just like, it's rough.
Damn. Yeah, and then you just gotta imagine how that must make that like the person that it's happening to feel, where like they probably know they're not supposed to be sleeping in the lobby, but like what the heck else are they supposed to do?
Like I'm supposed to go home and deal with like my parent treating me poorly, and like the parent came to like talk to them because my property manager had to reach out, and they were like very aggressive with the way they were talking to them, and like it was all just like not cool.
Right.
So I'm hoping that we end up with a at least decently positive resolution, but I'm worried that won't be the case, and it sucks.
Sure.
But yeah, so that's been my thorn for the past little bit. But for some more positive sides, my rose this week is that I am very excited that you and I are doing this podcast and recording a day early, because Colleen and I are going on a vacation this weekend to Colorado. Looking very much forward to that. Just have a half day in the morning to tidy up everything at work before going on my way. But I'm excited about that. Should be a really nice time. So a big rose for me for this weekend. And then,
do you remember the feeling of half days in school when, you know, it's like the tail end of the year, so it's like, you know, it's like 12:45, you step out, it's like warm, you got like a t-shirt on,
it's gonna be
just the world at your fingertips.
That's gonna be the
vibe. Is
vibe.
a beautiful thing. Yeah.
Like,
I'm looking forward to that, like, for your sake, dude. I'm gonna live vicariously through you, dude. The feeling of like a warm half day, like, honestly, I hope the sun is shining tomorrow, because, dude, that's gonna be such a good feel of just fucking off of work, like, later, guys.
Oh yeah, like I'm excited. I'm a little nervous. I don't think it's gonna be quite the same feeling that I got back then, where I'm like, okay, like, peace out, and like the clock struck whatever time, I'm gone. I think it's gonna be like, okay, do I have everything ready? Do I have all the information? Okay, I guess I can go now. Bye, guys. But once I'm out the door, I'll probably get that same like, summertime feel that you would get at the end of the school year for sure. So
it's a good feeling. I'm looking forward to the vacation for you, sir. That's good vibes.
Yeah, so should be an awesome time. But my seed this week is kind of goes along with it. We are going to be leaving Senna, of course, for a couple days with Colleen's family to keep an eye on her, make sure she doesn't drop out of school, get into drugs, really fall in with the wrong crowd.
Sure.
So they're going to be keeping her in check for a few days, and I think it's like, I'm stressed a little bit about it, but like it's also good to just be able to be like, okay, like it is okay sometimes for us to like go do stuff and just like leave her to have someone else to take care of her for a little bit and all. But it's like a big moment in that, like, there hasn't been a night since we've gotten her that one of us has not been there like with her. So yeah, it's like a nice step to see how she handles it, and then hopefully be able to work with that a little bit more for other vacations and future things. So
yeah, it's nice to have a little home away from home for the puppy. That's well, exciting for them. Excited, honestly, for Colleen's family. They get to have a little rugrat running around. But yeah, like you said, after school programs, keep them out of trouble. That's the way to go.
yeah, make sure she drinks her milk, builds strong bones and all. Yeah,
Of course.
So,
Of course.
but that's my rose, thorn, and seed for the week. And leading into some of the other kind of little small topics, quick hitters, I have a question for you, and I don't know if there's an answer for it, but I was thinking about this the other day.
Kind of question.
I know. It's a philosophical question. So driving to and from work, there are roads that I've talked about before. I know them very well, but probably not everyone who's driving does. They drive too slow for my liking, and it bugs me. But I think I like realized with some of the folks that I end up behind, I'm like, they are going like faster than the slowness that annoys me. So like it's not worth me being like irritated because they're not slowing me down that much. Like, but is there like a name or explanation for like when I'm behind someone in traffic? I might be going, so say I'm going 40 miles an hour behind someone in traffic. I might drive that same road going 40 miles an hour with no one in front of me, just because like that's the speed I'm driving. But I feel like I'm going slower when there's someone in front of me. I'm kind of curious if there's a like name for that or if that's an actual thing, because that's what I feel like. I feel like if I'm going like 40 just with no one in front of me and I'm just chilling, just like cruising at 40, okay, no,
Like it feels faster than it is, maybe.
like or that it's more the reverse. It's like going like 40, 50, whatever that set speed is, when there's no one in front of me, I just feel like I'm going a good pace, whatever. But if I'm going that same pace and there's someone sitting in front of me going the same speed just right in front of me, I'm like, fuck, I'm going so slow. This person needs to speed up. Like, what is going on? And the only thing that I could find, because there is a name for what you were saying with like when you're driving like quickly and then you slow down, like you feel like you're going super slow. Like if you're driving like if you're on like the turnpike for going 75 for like an hour,
like 90
and then
to
you
40.
hop off the exit. Yeah. So that is called Velocitation, which is where the change in speed makes you feel like the delta makes you feel like you're going super slow. But
I would imagine then what you're talking about, the scientific word for that is aggravation. The feeling of sitting behind another car at 40 miles per hour.
Yeah, because if I'm going 40 behind them, and I would go 40 anyway, and I would be perfectly fine, I'm just like...
Right, but that's your choice. They are removing that choice from you, and that is, like... That is so core to my anger that, like, I know that explicitly.
Okay.
It is the feeling of them removing control from you, where they've parked themselves in front of you and they're just like, deal with it, motherfucker. It is a what did they charge Saddam Hussein with? Like war crimes, like crimes against humanity. I put it like up on that level. I do. I truly do. Speed limits.
Yeah.
I'll just stop there.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Because I guess it's that you're losing your freedom. That's what
Exactly.
it is. They're
You are
taking my
trapped.
freedom.
Yep. And hey, if there's nobody in front of you or behind you and you want to cruise forward, well, fuck. I mean, see, but they may be like, there may not be anybody in front of them, and they're just like, hey, man, I'm going 40. I'm living the dream.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's a perspective game, my friend.
It is. It is.
I want to murder every single one of them. I'll tell you that.
Oh man, the things that I say behind a steering wheel sometimes. Oh my. But getting to some of the quick hitters, just a like piece of news. Twitch's CEO stepped down this past week after 16 years of being at the head of Twitch. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what, or if there are transitions with kind of the platform, how they're set up and all. We've talked about other platforms that have kind of started up to challenge Twitch a little bit in terms of how they at least compensate creators and things like that. So just kind of a news article that I saw that I was like, that sounds like something interesting to mention.
Hopefully, well, I think the consistent gripe that me and you have had is I'm curious if they go more towards hot tub on the main page or away from hot tub on the main page. I think that's like a pretty, what would you say, pretty red line that I think a lot of people are looking at, because that kind of shows you where their attention is. Like, are we looking like for more money, more eyes, like more clicks? Or are we looking for like more wholesome eyes, more wholesome clicks?
Yeah, so that's
which
like
is less ad revenue.
So that's the scale, and so there's like two ends.
Right.
Hot tub is like here, and you're like, is it gonna go here? Is it gonna go here?
Mm-hmm.
Where does hot tub? How far do you have to scroll to get to hot tub streams? Is the question there?
The metric that we're going with, yeah.
Yeah. So an interesting new scale has come out of this at the very least, but another esport kind of topic, but CS:GO pros had an opportunity to play the new Counter-Strike game, Counter-Strike 2, that's going to be coming out. I think it's still in like the pre-release stages and all.
Whoa!
But the comments at least were initially positive, at least about how it looks. Forrest, who plays, I think still is a current player, but had played for a long time, said it's gorgeous. Get Right said it's beautiful. Kenny S said, enjoy CS2, trust me, it's good. So some positive kind of commendations of the game before it's fully released and everything. So I don't know if it's gonna be a good game, but it sounds like at least people think it looks pretty good, and I'm sure once competitive hits it, it'll have some tweaks and whatnot, but that's cool to have a fresh CS game, because it's been quite a while.
Yeah, it's interesting too, especially, and I don't know like what the developer team is or whatever, but if I remember correctly, there were not many changes made throughout the course of each game. Not as many as like a League of Legends or like a Dota or something like this, where there's patches all the time. Something like Valorant that's like having new heroes added in, Rainbow Six Siege. If I remember correctly, the CS games had way fewer like patches, meaning like the game state stayed pretty consistent for a while. It's interesting that it comes in these like larger like game to game updates. I think that's a really fun way to do it, especially when there's so many years in between them. It's definitely a different philosophy model than like the Call of Duties, where the life cycle of the Call of Duty esport year to year, it's based on like what game is out that year, where like the CDL it's not going to be Modern Warfare 2 next year. It's going to be, maybe like Vanguard 2 or whatever game is out in the Call of Duty.
Yeah.
So just an interesting life cycle strategy for the game. But yeah, looking forward to it. I think that'll be pretty cool.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it'll be interesting, and of course the release dates have kind of shifted, and there's new conversation about that now. Who knows when it will officially come out, but definitely something to keep an eye out for. Maybe I can get in on the ground level of Counter-Strike, and then
go.
like it'll be like when League first came out. I can just like climb the ladder quickly. No one will know how to play or anything like that. No one's gonna be hopping off of CS:GO and going over there and just destroying me or anything. I'm sure.
Yeah,
so.
I can't imagine the skills would translate that well. I imagine.
So so new game. Two final little quick notes, but the 1,000 Miles of Sebring and the 12 Hours of Sebring events just happened recently. So the 1,000 Miles of Sebring is a endurance. Well, it's a long-term endurance race. The final time for the winning team was 8 hours 19 minutes. 8 hours 19 seconds and 19.877 seconds, whatever that is. So they ended up winning the race. It's a 1,000-mile, like similar to the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and all in Sebring, Florida. And so they host that event. And where I actually kind of got more interested was that in the 12 Hours of Sebring, which is another endurance race that they host, Scott McLaughlin from IndyCar actually finished third in that race. So he finished up there with the likes of a number of people that I don't recognize. But yeah, his team finished. So he was a team of 3, and they finished third overall in that event.
And these are single seaters, correct?
I believe. I'm not 100% sure. Because in the 1,000 Miles of Sebring, the Ferrari car ended up going wide, spinning, and then slammed into a tire barrier and flipped on its roof. And it looks like more like a supercar than a single seater. So I would imagine these are probably supercars.
Gotcha.
I don't know too much, but yeah, it looks like maybe you can kind of go with whatever. It looks like there's been a mix of single seaters and like touring supercars. So
gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. When you said the 1,000 Miles of Sebring, I pictured the 2003 Chrysler Sebring that I linked you there in the chat. I was like, why do we care about 1,000 of these on a racetrack? And then I googled it. I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. They're like supercars and fast. But when I think of Sebring, that's what I think of, and I'm like, that is.
I did not know that was. I guess that's probably where it got its name. I didn't even realize that was a car model. Was that a Caddy?
Chrysler.
Chrysler. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And
I saw it and saw old person car.
100%, exactly. So I'm like, you're talking about these things racing around? Like, what? Like, that is immediately what flew into my head.
Oh yeah, they're cruising around that on their way home from church to get the groceries. They're zooming. Yeah.
Dude, can you imagine fucking Nana just like revving her engine, looking over at fucking Auntie Sims, like, you trying to go? You trying to go? and they just fucking haul ass just all the way down to the super fresh.
Yeah,
First
like
one into the parking lot wins.
37 miles an hour top speed, just flying. Right.
and that's not because they're trying to like go slow. That is just the max speed of the Chrysler Sebring.
Exactly. So,
yeah, brutal.
But moving on into some more racing topics and all, leading up to the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix that we had this past weekend. Going into the weekend, of course, on day one, it's probably going to happen every single race now that it's happened at 2, but Lewis had to go see the stewards in regard to his jewelry and all, again, even though he has a doctor's note that clears him of like having to remove his jewelry, which he presented, and like the Mercedes team presented on his behalf or whatever at the first race of the season. They called him down again this time to, I assume, do the same exact thing. So this is just going to be a every race kind of thing, maybe. So I'll just keep an eye out for it. But it's just a stupid, ridiculous thing that I saw kind of going into the race weekend. I'm like, why? He already, like, you did this. Why are you doing it again? Just to bug him?
Well, maybe, I don't know the details, but maybe a doctor's note is not like,
indefinite.
Well, it sounds kind of silly. Like it's not like a health thing. They're trying.
It was because, to some extent, they were saying with his, I think it was his nose ring or one of them, if he took the piercing out for the amount of time for racing, and everything, that there was like risk of infection or something like that. So there was they had a viable reason and everything to be like, hey, like, stop pushing this. Like, come on. So, and it's not like a risk to anyone else kind of thing either. Like, if I feel like to some extent at that point, like, yeah, there are some safety regulations that it's like, okay, yes, we're going to implement these for everyone, like the halo or things like that. But for the driver to be like, yeah, I'm going to keep my nose ring in or wear a necklace or something, like, if you're like, hey, we highly advise you don't because of the risks in case of whatever catastrophe, then, and the person's like, yes, I'm signing this saying that, like, I understand and agree that that is your recommendation, but, like, I'm going to do my thing. I think that's, like...
That sounds more useful than a doctor's note.
Yeah, like, I just don't understand why this is being, like, pushed against Lewis by the FIA. It's just weird. Like, especially after, like, going through this the first race, now they're going through it again. I'm like, just, like, why? Like, why go through the same thing when it was already, like, resolved?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, maybe from the steward's perspective, it was not resolved. That's my argument. And Mercedes just thought that it would be good enough. But ultimately, like, yeah, I don't think it is the hill to die on for the FIA. However, I could see a scenario where they just want to do their best to enforce the rules that they have so as not to look kind of weak or flip-floppy in other areas. Same thing like, with...
if you're going to keep doing this, we're going to keep doing this.
Right, and eventually, like, it's going to cost Mercedes more in the long run than it is to have a steward just say to Lewis, like, hey, could you please take your nose ring out? Like, that's way easier for the FIA to do than take away from Lewis's, weekend prep and this and that. So, does it seem worthwhile? No. Do I understand a rule enforcing body to enforce the rules that it's set up, however arbitrary the reasons? Yeah, that does make sense to me. Should it be news on a weekend? No, I don't think so.
No, I mean, it's just the fact, like, I guess anytime someone has to visit the stewards, the FIA has to put out a documented, like, statement of, like, who was brought in, what team they drive for, like the things that it's like number and driver, competitor, what time, what's the reason, what's the offense, and it's like you're just gonna go through that, and it's gonna get just publicly put out because they do that for like any incident.
Well, I've been making a list and checking it twice about who's on the naughty list. So I mean, it is helpful for some.
Well, you did check it twice. Hopefully, this was them checking it twice, and we don't have to worry about it more. But going into the weekend, of course, the biggest news of the weekend was Charles Leclerc taking his third out of 2 control electronics, which was the 10 place grid penalty, his second of 3 MGUH, and then his second of 3 allowed ICEs. So a lot of battery upgrades or changes that needed to happen leading to his 10 place grid penalty before the weekend even started. So definitely a rough way to go into the second race, already surpassing one of those kind of penalizing parts by getting another set of the control electronics for the car. So,
and I'm curious, like, is that something that tends to be a problem like that? Do you think, he incurs this penalty and then it'll just be, do you think it'll last for the rest of the season? Maybe he has to take one more kind of thing?
The only reason I could see would be, I don't think that's a common one to replace. It sounds like they replaced it after, or like partway through the first race weekend, which was like they had their first one, they replaced it during the first weekend, so they were on their second set, and then because of the power unit failure and everything from last race and all, he ended up taking the third set. So
gotcha.
So yeah, definitely. I would expect if they changed them or that early on, then they were like, yeah, we're fine if we just change it and like go through the rest of the season. Or we're just like, yeah, one race down the road, we'll just take a new power unit and a new this and a new that, and like we'll get a back of the grid penalty like we would have to at some point anyway.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
So that's probably the case there. But on the other side of the top of the grid, well, the slightly ahead at the top of the grid, Red Bull had a couple of new power unit things as well. Checo had had his energy store changed and his control electronics, so he also went on to that second set that you're allowed of control electronics after one race. So I would imagine it's just expected that it'll last like a while typically, and so hopefully we won't see that flare up too much. And then of course Max, after the qualifying, which I'm sure we'll chat about briefly, ended up getting a new gearbox case and cassette, a gearbox driveline, and some other components changed, but it was his second set, so there was no penalty for that. I guess any subsequent would have penalties.
Yeah, and this is jumping way forward, but we even had some suspicions of maybe even those parts being hopefully not in danger. We ended up finishing the race, but yeah, the issues in qualifying ended up, having some foreshadowing qualities to them.
Yeah, most definitely in looking at the qualifying. So we start off pretty hot in Q1. Max does a nice little like out lap, hot lap, cool down lap, back to the pits, and cruises through to doesn't have to go back out, cruises through to Q2 with one of the best times that ended up coming out of qualifying in general. So a pretty nice start. That qualifying time would have put Max up to... He would have been in P4 to start the race with that qualifying time. But of course, getting into Q2 ends up coming around, getting ready for the hot lap, and no hot lap, no gearbox, no drive. So tough start for the defending world champion after a good first race to immediately have issues and have to start down in P15 for the race.
Yeah, that's really tough. I'm curious. So, and yeah, I remember that happening in the qualifying. I'm curious looking at gotcha. I understand the mistake that I did. Sorry. Yeah, gotcha. All right, now we're yeah, here we are. I was going to say, why does he have a Q3 time set if he wasn't in Q3? Cuz you were saying that, I'm like, yeah, you're right. He did have issues. What's going on here? All right, continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so a tough start for Max, but one of the other drivers that had like a really rough go of it this weekend in the quali was Logan Sargent. Let's see how many rings. Oh, it was 2. That Bell has had issues lately where it just like it'll go like 8 times. She'll like touch it once and it'll just like ring and ring and ring and ring.
Damn.
Anyway, but Logan Sargent for the Williams squad. I mentioned it on the Race Companion. You can check out our live thoughts on the YouTube. But Logan Sargent, really tough qualifying. He had 2 really good shots at representative laps, but wasn't able to nail one in that first qualifying session. His pace easily would have put him up into the top 15 to at least make it out of Q1, which would have been really solid, especially with Alex Albon not making it out of Q1. Based on his first hot lap, he was at a better pace than Alex was, and into the top 15, but couldn't hook it up, spun out a couple times, hit some curbs, and I guess that's the rookie woes a little bit. But I was really impressed to see that he had some solid pace going out there. Just definitely a bummer that he couldn't quite hook it up for a full lap to put a time out there. Ends up 38 seconds off with his hot lap that he kind of coasted in. So.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate from that position, especially when like we do see good racing from him when he does have the opportunity. It's tough that he wasn't able to, put himself in a good position in the qualifying where we have seen him, be pretty racy come Sunday. One qualifying winner that I was hoping to see a little more out of was the P9 out of Oscar Piastri in the McLaren. Really solid drive, really solid qualifying, I thought. But had a tough time on Sunday, but a great qualifying, I think, both for him, in the rookie spot, but then also for the McLaren as well, who just, overall the morale is pretty down on McLaren. So I thought that was a pretty nice showing from Oscar Piastri.
Yeah, definitely a highlight for sure. I think he is kind of the stud out there of the qualifying performances in terms of like expectations to what they ended up doing. Leclerc, though, as well, putting it up to P2 in the qualifying, 10-place grid penalty, of course, to drop him back down. But that is a really solid single lap from the Ferrari, especially seeing these issues that we've seen initially with the cars and just not quite having the pace of the Red Bulls. To put it up that high off the bat, 0.3 up off of Fernando Alonso, who's there in P3. A really nice qualifying from Leclerc.
Yeah, and it's crazy just looking at those Q3 times in general. It's crazy seeing how like the top six are separated by, just like 7/10, and then the rest of the field is just a little bit more there. It's kind of wild how close all of these vehicles and drivers are, honestly. Like
Mm.
when they're broken out, they've each got their own row. It almost doesn't tell the story of just how close it really is. You got to look at the numbers and say like, holy shit, these guys are cutting at margins here.
Oh, absolutely. It's pretty exciting that qualifying is this close. Like we said after
Hmm.
the Q1 of the first race, the top like 19 were separated by like 1.2 seconds, which is unheard of in Formula One. So
Hmm.
it has potential. Like I know that the Red Bulls are so dominant right now, and we'll get to talk about that a little bit later, but it shows how close, at least on that single lap pace, some of these other constructors are to being like
Hmm.
to catching up. Like
Right.
the margins are smaller. It's just these are the first couple weeks, and the Red Bulls just are ahead of the game on everyone at the moment. So it's definitely something that I expect to shift around a little bit as the season progresses and all. Um, but moving into the race weekend, so Max, of course, was saying he was after the qualifying. He was he was of course disappointed, but felt like they could. He was optimistic about the opportunities for to move up towards the top of the grid and everything going into the weekend. And that he did. He and Leclerc both made nice pushes at the start of the race to kind of make their way up through the grid. I was a little hasty, I think, on my projections. I said he would be in the top 10 by lap 3, I think, during the race companion. I think it took a little bit longer than that to work his way up, but ends up fighting his way through the field quite well. Little help from the safety car as well.
Hmm. Yeah, and there was a sense in which, like before the race, you kind of knew, even though the qualifying performance like wasn't all that great, you kind of had a feeling that his car was going to be quick enough to get up to a certain point pretty freely. And to use your point, which I thought was beautiful, was a bunch of these other drivers, their race isn't with him really.
Mm,
So they're not going to waste a lot of their, let's say, like rubber resources to like fight his passing.
yeah.
So yeah, it took him a little while, but he was a pretty quick driver on the track. It was able to make a lot of overtakes happen in a pretty short amount of time. But the thing that stuck out for me about this race is the story of the two DNFs, where it comes from two drivers where you didn't really want to see it. Not that you ever want to see any driver DNF, but Lance, who was at a great pace, having a really good race for
I think it
Aston
was like
Martin,
P5, P6 at the time, something like that. Like
just
just
cruising,
yeah.
just really cruising, and like, and having that kind of team performance that would leapfrog Aston Martin in the constructors championships. So for him to have the mechanical failure that he did, and this is the flag that you were alluding to, having the mechanical failure that he did, I thought was just big unfortunate. And then again for Alex Albon in the Williams, was driving a great race overall. His qualifying was decent, not not like wonderful, kind of where you expect the Williams to be, but that team, those drivers are doing pretty well. So it was a shame to see both of them get DNFs, where like it wasn't their fault. They weren't overdriving the car. It was just mechanical failures. And that's when it's really tough, especially when the drivers are, having a great day.
Yeah, I definitely. And looking at especially with a day where the rest of the grid comes mostly unscathed through,
Right.
and you have almost everyone finish. Only one person being lapped, that being Valtteri Bottas, was the only lapped person for this race, which was a little bit of a surprise. But the Alfa Romeo so far has not seemed superb. It doesn't have quite the pace I think that I expected it to. But we had a lot of good fights, kind of in the second half of the grid, I guess. We had a little bit of fighting over that P10 position throughout the race, but a lot of the fights for position were from that 11 down to like 15 kind of spot there. So it wasn't a ton of action at the top. The kind of most intriguing part was, of course, we had the two Ferraris pit. We had Sainz on lap 15. We had Leclerc on lap 16 go ahead and take their pit stops. And then immediately after that, Lance Stroll's car just dies on him, causing a safety car where we see both of the Mercedes as well as Verstappen jump up spaces on the grid, not really have to fight through as many cars, get the cheap pit stop and everything, and immediately put those Ferraris in a tough spot. So that's just the way it goes, but it seems lately that is kind of Ferrari's luck, that they're just like, oh yeah, we're going to pit, we're going to take the undercut and safety car. Awesome. So definitely tough. Like they were having decent pace, but that really kind of screwed them out of competing a ton later on. The two of them just both were so close with the Mercedes. I feel like the two of them are on very similar levels right now. But losing that 10 seconds or so in terms of time lost to the other cars in the pit stop just was a rough way for that to happen, because we could have seen a lot more good fighting, good racing between them, I think, otherwise.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's something, though. I mean, because it was a mechanical failure, it wasn't like I don't think it matters whatever kind of flag it is, but it can't be predicted. It's not necessarily anybody's fault. So I think that's something that we can look down the line and predict pretty reliably. Something like this is going to happen to at least 4 of the other teams on some race, where they're just on the short end of the safety car stick. But yeah, it was really unfortunate because you could see, I think Ferrari was both of the drivers were having the kind of race where it easily could have been both of them 4-5, and having the Mercedes 6-7 in that position. Had they waited, what would it have been, 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, to pit. So pretty unfortunate timing, but overall, it's not like it killed their race. They were in 2 pretty solid point scoring positions, keeping themselves up there. But yeah, maybe just frustrating overall.
Yeah, I would agree. Ferrari. Yeah, and of course I'd also be frustrated if I was Oscar Piastri. You had mentioned him in qualifying, putting up P9 and then just getting clipped by the Alpine of Pierre Gasly on lap 1, taking off his end plate, needing an entire front wing change, and then just going from that P9 position all the way down, tumbling down the grid, having to pit early to change that front wing and all. Just bad luck for him too. It was definitely a racing incident. It's tight and tough early on with cars going 3 wide and everything. I don't think Gasly, it was definitely not like a intentional or even a knowing kind of incident from Gasly. It didn't look like not. But just one of the unfortunate things where these cars are bunched up so tight, going so fast, so quick out the gate. So a rough one for Piastri. And then of course his teammate Lando Norris had a rough go of it on the day as well. Just really that McLaren car is struggling outside of being able to potentially have some good single lap pace like Piastri was able to show during quali.
Yeah, and really over the long term, not really showing up either. So I think we're gonna have to see a lot of probably a lot of things changing for the better for the McLaren team before we really see them in the contention to get any kind of points. But I think it was an encouraging show from Oscar Piastri. But yeah, unfortunate start to the day for him, and he was just clawing back the whole time.
Yeah,
But yeah, I
definitely
think.
definitely
Go ahead.
just a tough way to have to go about your race day, kind of trying to salvage whatever you have, especially after the issue with the car in week one where he just got to drive like 7 laps or however long it
Right.
was. And then having this happen this weekend, that's pretty brutal.
He was still able to get some, oh geez, still able to get some like wheel to wheel racing done towards the end of the race, having some meetings with some other drivers. So that's always just valuable experience to get. I think he stated pretty like low stakes wheel to wheel racing. And it was
It's
he
good
stated that he
experience.
valued. Yep,
Yeah,
there you go.
absolutely. But moving on, I guess the other biggest kind of news. So of course there's Max fighting his way up from P15, getting up to P2. Not ever able to really catch Checo. Was just like around that 5 to 10 seconds back for the last little bit there. But Fernando Alonso as well. There's a lot of weirdness for Fernando on the weekend. He has a great qualifying, puts it on third in qualifying, starting P2 on the front row. Great start from Fernando. Takes the lead of the race. Awesome drive. And just getting past Checo. But unfortunately, the penalty was given for him not being in the right starting position, and it kind of just like got weird for him from there.
We were making jokes about the two techs that like had their hands on, and the Jack guy that like there was no mistaking the contact with the back of the car. And then I guess even before that was an issue, there's the question of like, can you even serve those penalties under a safety car where it's like really not even that like you're not taking the full brunt of the penalty. So yeah, just a lot of question marks. But I was dying laughing at the dude that just like didn't get the memo about the penalty and just went to jack that car up. And I'm curious like how they handle that internally. Is there like a strike system, or is that just grounds for termination where it's like, hey man, you caused us a penalty, you're fucking out of here. I'm curious what the forgiveness level is, and me and Sarah were assuming it was close to 0.
Pretty cutthroat there.
Right.
I would imagine that I feel like they get second opportunities. I
Sure.
think you gotta especially if they've shown it in practice that they can get it done. I mean, penalties are a weird scenario, and so that's kind of what it came down to in terms of all of this. I mean, they give Fernando the penalty for not being within the starting, like the proper starting locks. He wasn't too far up. He was just like slightly off center, which we've seen other people do plenty of times. I saw a bunch of things after the race of like times that had happened and that were like not penalized. But for one thing, okay, you're going to penalize him. 2, the FIA regulations, we're talking about rule following it earlier on, but Their sporting regulations say any decision or communication concerning a particular competitor should be given to him within 25 minutes of the decision. So this happened. His pit stop was lap 16. You're going 50 laps on this race. Each lap is over a minute and a half. You're looking at least like 80 minutes afterwards that they are doling out this penalty to Alonso. So they're not within their own time constraints that they put on that. But not even that, they let him go up on the podium. Aston Martin has to go back. Aston Martin had ended up showing the FIA 7 different instances of teams touching the rear jack while serving similar penalties without the FIA penalizing them. And so we go from Fernando, 100th podium of his career, popping champagne, having a blast. Then we get a lovely, and this cracks me up. I'll send you these. I meant to send them earlier, but Mercedes ends up posting this tweet with George Russell getting the 3rd place trophy after the fact. Because of the penalty, and then ends up posting a nice little makeup tweet shortly after with him, and the trophy just says P4 on it, and says, "Don't worry, pick's still good." So.
So they gave Alonso back the P3.
Yes, so they let Alonso go up on the podium, pop champagne, 100th podium for El Mission.
Right.
Then afterwards, they're like, hold up, wait a minute. 10-second penalty, George Russell's P3. We're sending someone to Aston Martin's garage to pick up the trophy, bring it to George. Mercedes social media admins like, smile and say, cheese, George, click, post that on social media. And then after that, the FIA goes and reinstates Fernando Alonso's 3rd place after the contest, or after Aston Martin contested the penalties. So Fernando ends up getting his 100th podium in one of the most weird, controversial, that shouldn't have been controversial ways. So yeah, Fernando's 100th podium was ruined. It's fine.
What? That's so funny. And it's that has nothing to do with the drivers or anything like that.
Nothing at all.
George is just okay. As he's getting in and handing it away. That's super funny.
I saw George tweeted out, he's first silverware of the season, and I'm I saw it, and then 10 minutes later, it's Fernando Alonso reinstated, and George just didn't take down the tweet, and I'm good for you. I'm what are you supposed to do? That's
quality.
Yeah, it was cracking me up. So
damn. Well, and they were both really good sports about it when asked,
yeah.
So yeah, I think they're just. I mean, yeah, it's a long season, and that will likely not mean too much in the long run. So yeah, just a little funny snafu, it seems like.
Yeah, definitely. But to speak on Alonso a little bit more, this is his best season start since he had in 2012 with Ferrari. He has 30 points in the first 2 races. In 2012, he had 35 in the first 2 races. So this is kind of the closest he's been to that since, which is very exciting, I think, in terms of everyone having another team up there competing, especially one that wasn't expected. The first weekend was not a fluke. They're up there, and Alonso now joins the likes of Kimi Räikkönen, Alain Prost, Sebastian Vettel, Michael Schumacher, and Lewis Hamilton in the over 100 podium club. So it is a very, very tight club up there. with
That's pretty cool.
with 100 podiums or more. So very
Oh, silly George Russell had to taint it, dude.
yeah. It's all his fault. Everyone send hate mail to George. Sign it from us. No.
Boo.
So yeah, just a weird situation to get that 100th podium. But looking now at like team standings and all, Red Bull's out there a good ways in front. We're going to, I think, have a pretty exciting fight for second. Aston Martin is tied now with Mercedes at 38 points apiece in the constructors, with Ferrari at 26. So, of course, Mercedes catching up this week with Lance Stroll not finishing the race. Then we also had Haas get their first points of the season, with Kevin Magnussen finishing in 10th place. So they got that 1 point up there on the board. But overall, not the most exciting race, but definitely interesting in some of the other kind of tertiary aspects of it.
I think it was the best race that we've had there so far. I like the DRS changes that they made. I like some of the structural changes that they made to a couple of the turns. It seemed like it made for just a much more fluid race and just lapping in general, where there wasn't as many what seemed like close encounters of the concrete kind.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Not as concerning in that aspect of guys crashing out. Like I said, we had 18 drivers finish at the end of the day. The two that didn't were not due to crashing, which is definitely good on these street circuits that tend to be a little bit tighter and leave a few more paint scrapes on the sides of the cars.
But yeah, I think it was a quite a fun 2023 Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. I thought it was quite fun.
Yeah, and so kind of as we're closing out the F1, I did want to go through a couple of points that I saw, and so things I think are interesting. But with Max, of course, he was vocal in his interviews afterwards that he was disappointed that he ended up finishing in P2, that without the mechanical issue, he thinks that he definitely could have won the race and all, which, hey, I mean, who knows? We can't really know that at the end of the day. Checo drove a really solid weekend and solid race on Sunday, so I don't think that there's much that you can like critique Checo on, but Max, of course, was pretty vocal about how he felt and was disappointed in the way the race went. His dad, of course, was Jos Verstappen is definitely a bit inflammatory to the non-Max fan crowd, and was saying that he feels like Sergio doesn't get this chance too often, so of course when he has the chance to, he's going to go for it and all to take the win, which is, of course, I think we're seeing a little bit of a contention on both sides maybe start to flare up early on, which I think this is probably the most similar start to a season to Lewis and Nico and their kind of teammate rivalry. I don't think there's another recent, like Lewis and Valtteri, although they traded races here and there. Lewis was never really close to losing those titles to Valtteri, so
Right.
So starting off, this is definitely a pretty tight way to start the season. But the big point, or the big like hot topic, was now after the race. I don't know if you've seen much out there, but what did you think about Max going for the fastest lap in terms of like as a teammate and everything. We heard on the radio Max asking like what, or Checo being told to keep to certain times and all. Then we're seeing Max go and take the fastest lap and everything at the end. A lot of people were including Sergio. Said he was told to keep a certain pace. He was told that the same things were communicated to Max. But then, of course, Max goes and snatches that point to stay in the lead of the Drivers' Championship right at the end of on the last lap of the race. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts? I feel like a lot of people feel like it was kind of unsportsmanlike of Max. I think it's kind of fair game, and I think, to be honest, if Checo was like not being competitive, I don't know. I feel like Checo could have done the same thing that Max did, and no one would have batted an eye. I think Checo could have gone, "Oh, is Max going for the fastest lap?" And the team probably would have told him, like, "Yeah, it sounds like he's gonna try for it." And then Checo goes and just like tries to beat him, and they go to head to head. Like, I feel like Checo shouldn't have been caught unaware that Max was gonna want that point.
Right. Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm like, is that point really gonna make a difference as the season goes on? Like, it's not super common for the title fight to be decided by 1 point. Like, I think that especially this early, it does, but I think especially this early, there's plenty of time that will give opportunities to make up for those points on either side later in the season.
Sure. My question is, why would you not go for it if you were like truly, what am I really trying to say? It doesn't make sense for Max to not go for it every time. And then it is naive of Sergio to think that, like, whatever the team says is, like, the thing to do. And, like, well, the team told me to, like, just match the delta. Like, obviously he's selecting for, you know, play for the team, you know, just do the low risk thing, where Max is thinking like, oh, I want to win as much as I can. So I truly believe that's just a mistake on Sergio to not understand that about the teammate that he's up against. It doesn't seem like there's going to be any free lunches, and he thought that he was about to get one, kind of thing is what it sounds like, and then like being frustrated about it. I doubt it's going to happen in the future, hopefully. But if it does, that means that Sergio like isn't really learning about Max as a teammate and is being a little naive about like what's cool and what's right. Like, at the end of the day, you are racing against each other for points.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I think if you're not thinking about that, you are you're letting something slip a little bit. Like, it's not outrageous to think that
you're selecting for constructors, not drivers.
Yeah, and like, that's fine, but it's just not
what Max is doing. Max is selecting for for drivers.
Right. He's going for his best opportunity to like get as many points as possible. I think that's completely reasonable. But I think the other concern that people were mentioning was just the fact that, of course, Max was doing this after complaining, like you alluded to, about some weird noises and whatnot at high speeds and everything, and he's still just like, I'm fucking sending it. They told me the car is good, so I'm just like going for it.
Right, and that's the thing where it's like, okay, if the team has more data, if they're saying like it's fine, it is the right move to trust your team and believe that it's okay. And then that opens the door to say like, all right, well, I'm going to go for this point. And
Yeah.
then it makes me question, like when you say there are fans tending in one way or another, it makes me question, like, do they even really care about the racing? Because why would their sentiment be that they want Max when it is possible to get that point? Why would they want Max to hand it away? Like, you're actually not selecting for competitive racing then. What you want is like for your driver to get the thing. And it's like, well, I don't think that's what we're doing here. What you actually want to see is all of the drivers wanting to put themselves in a position to get that fastest lap point.
Yeah,
And
like
I think it
if
Go ahead.
anyone down the grid was like had a 20 some second gap, let's say a 30-second gap to the guy behind him, and you're in P8 and P9's 30 seconds behind you, fuck it, I'm pitting and going for that fastest lap. Like,
Right.
you can send it. It doesn't, like, I don't see why you just don't go for it. And like Checo was told, and there are radio messages where he was told like, you're free to, he was like, are we pushing now? And they were like, you're free to push. Like, that's all they told him. They're like, yeah, go for it. They didn't tell him like
Right.
Max is pushing, but they were like, yeah, you can push if you want, kind of thing.
Sure. So it
And
sounds
he
like
just
he
didn't.
was able to make his own decisions. Yeah.
Yeah, but the other interesting topic after the race weekend was that was from the Mercedes garage and all. So Lewis said that the Red Bull car is the most dominant challenger he's ever seen in his time in Formula One, and I just immediately go in my brain like, do you forget yourself from 2015 through 2021? Like, that car was very, very good to him. He drove it super well, but like that Mercedes car over the years has had some pretty big gaps to the other teams as well. So that was one. No, what do you think? I don't know if we've seen enough Formula One to necessarily say. I can say I watched the entire 2016 season, and there were very few doubts in my mind of whether a Mercedes was going to win each race or not. Like, I was just assuming that they were going to win every race. That was kind of my general assumption.
It seems like Lewis is just talking from the perspective of like maybe something that he's had to face before, like the most dominant opponent. You know, if challenger was the word that he used, it's tough to know what exactly he meant.
Yeah.
Maybe he was just like removing his experience out of the thing and just saying like, hey, barring me, like that's fucking dominant. You know, it could be that. Either way, I think it's just a driver understanding the competition. And yeah, it does seem like we're in a pretty high level era of Formula One.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. And like I feel like that may be what he was referencing, because that 2016 season, I just double checked myself, but Mercedes won 19 out of the 21 races. So it was just like, it's hard to imagine, but maybe, yeah, one of the best cars he's ever had to compete with, potentially.
Right.
But then coming also from Mercedes, Toto said that he is not upset with Red Bull's new dominance. He said we shouldn't talk it down. He's like, I remember hearing similar things between 2014 and 2020. And so he kind of spoke to the fact that he feels like, hey, like, you get that on merit in Formula One. Like, you're, especially now with the budget cap and everything, it's like yes, you can say Red Bull broke the budget cap, not substantially enough to be this far ahead this season. Like, that difference didn't make this gap this season. They just are ahead of the game, figured it out better, have, I don't know, better engineers, or have figured it out quicker. Just like Mercedes did for a long period of time. And I feel like it's interesting that that's being like, obviously I think that's probably something that comes up in the conversation every time a team has a dominant car. But like, Mercedes had the dominant car for 8 years. They won 8 constructors titles in a row. Like, then if you look further back, there are plenty of times where Ferrari had a stretch of years where they were dominant, or Williams had a stretch of years that were dominant, or this team had a stretch of years, or that team. Like, this isn't abnormal for a team to have like to win 2 drivers' championships in a row, win 1 constructors, and be leading the constructors for a second year. Like, it's not that bizarre that I think people should be like, oh, the sport is it's just not fair. There's not enough competition. It's like, it's 2 years. This isn't the same as other sports where, like, oh, at the end of an NFL season, your team could have 5 guys retire and this many draft picks, and like there's 53 guys on the roster that like change in and out. It's not the same. You got 2 guys and 1 team making the car. Like, there are a lot less variables that are going to like drastically shift things around. And I don't know. I just find it weird that people are like unhappy about Red Bull winning when it's just like, this is kind of how Formula One goes.
Well, it's sure that's an easy position to take when it's your team that's at the top. You're like, oh, dude, I mean, I'm cool with it.
I was sick of it with Mercedes too. Like, but that was after.
Well,
that was just knowing. Yeah, good. Sorry. Go ahead.
Not condemning you for that, just to say that, like, maybe it's from a perspective of the fans are hoping that you would come from like out of one dominant era and maybe get some time where things seem to be in flux, and then after 2 years, then the Red Bull dominance could come, and then they'd be happy and say like, whatever. Maybe they just didn't want to come from under one iron fist to another.
Okay. That's fair. I guess I can understand that. I would have to do more research to know if that's the way it was, but also a lot of new F1 fans don't have the historical stuff that I'm also missing as well. So sure. It's I just think of it like as kind of, and obviously like being a fan of Red Bull, I am like okay with 2 years of Red Bull doing well. Exactly. Like, I'm not I'm not gonna lie about it, but I also like in my like couple years of watching Formula One before the shift of like rule sets and everything in 2021, was I annoyed that Mercedes kept winning every race, that I would go and hang out with my friends and like go to the beach and be like, it's an F1 morning, Sunday morning, everyone's hungover. Sorry, you're watching F1. And they're all just like, oh, Lewis is just going to win again. Why do you even watch this bullshit? The Mercedes car is just better, so they win every time. And I'm like, well, that's because they have the better team that made the better car that gets them to and has the better drivers to get them to this point. I was like, yeah, did I want Red Bull to win? 100%. Was I like pissed off that Mercedes like was winning because they built the better car? Like, no, they just built the better car and had the better drivers. Like, how can I can't fault them for just like doing better than everyone else. Like, that's not their fault that they figured it out. Just like how I see it now, I'm like, that's silly to be upset about Red Bull. But
if you're coming into it, like, we're taking a pretty neutral stance on it, selecting for competition, selecting for, we want to see each team, basically we're looking to see each team develop over the long term. Yes, we're checking in at each individual point, but we understand like narrative as a whole. We understand that one weekend is not just one weekend. Right. There's a whole string of context that goes along with it. What I think what is missing from the conversation is the part where the people say, hey, I'm selecting for entertainment and excitement when I say this. Like, I imagine most people are coming at it from the angle of like, this is creating quote unquote boring races, because any layman with a tablet can predict like, Max Verstappen at the top of the grid. Like, it's just easy to say that's not necessarily weekend in, weekend out that exciting. Let's say if you're not inclined to that team specifically, maybe you're looking for just more shakeup in general. Yeah, like, not that cool. No matter what team is at the top, even if it's a Ferrari, even if it's like a fucking Alpine, that may be more exciting for some and easy to stomach because it hasn't happened in a while. There's like the novelty exciting thing with it. But overall, I mean, I think it's the angle of people just selecting for wanting like an exciting, entertaining, fucking like crash-filled weekend.
Yeah, because I guess that's a good point, that we are looking at the narratives in the long term, and I'm sure there are plenty of people that watch it just like race to race and aren't don't really follow anything in between. They're just like, it's race day, I'm gonna sit down, watch the race, I'm hoping my team does like wins, like with like the Eagles in football. Like if I see someone's injured or something like that, I'll see those reports throughout the week, but I'm not like, okay, like what's going on? What are they saying in the daily press conferences about what XYZ, blah, 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 blah. Like, I'm not like into the nitty gritty with that. I'm just like, I'm showing up on Sunday and yelling, go Birds. Like, I know about football, but I'm not like gonna be sitting there grinding through articles and things like that about football. Where I guess like having the nuance of a narrative, and like we like in the preseason when we're going through each team, like every single team we talked about, we're like, we hope they do better than last year, except for like Red Bull, because you can't do better than first. Like we're sitting there and we're like, we want to see progress. We want to see growth, like individual drivers as a team. Like we're excited about that, whereas other folks are not. So it's
You're just seeing 1, 2, 3.
I see these articles and I'm like, come on. But that's I guess that might be a me problem a little bit too. So
I think a lot of it has to do with your Red Bull bias. Yeah, it's heavy bias. My winning perspective that I have for the past like year and some change, I'm just like locked in on what it is to be a winner. That's life. And if that's the case, how could you not be a Red Bull fan? Truly,
exactly. There's no.
It goes hand in hand.
There's no other option. Just slamming Red Bulls and talking about just winning traditions. Cloud9 over in the LCS. I know where we had a little bit of kind of playoff expectations and all, but at the top of the board, my team again. Sorry, guys. Just don't hate me. Hate your teams for being worse than mine. That's all I can say.
Exactly.
But
they've got CLG in their first round for the playoffs. CLG has obviously like looked pretty decent this season.
yeah.
So it may be maybe an okay matchup, but I imagine that's probably Cloud9's.
I think it's gonna be a pretty good matchup. CLG's played pretty well throughout the season. I've been pretty impressed with them overall. Looking at just especially like keeping the same roster that they had last year and just like letting that grow and their cohesion and teamwork and everything. They've had a pretty solid split as a whole. I think Dokla was kind of one of my question marks on the team in particular, and he has played very well throughout the split. So as a whole, I do expect Cloud9 to win that matchup. I think Blabber and Berserker individually have played like phenomenally. Eminus has been like a solid mid laner from the matches I've watched and all, but I do expect them to win. I don't think it's gonna be super duper tight, but we've got a few rounds of playoffs to go. I like that. I'm just happy that there's a winners and losers bracket so that we at least have the opportunity for like some of these teams to continue through the bracket and make their way to the finals.
Yeah, I think it's a really good choice for the playoffs to have the losers bracket. Sometimes we've seen Riot include it. Sometimes we've seen Riot not include it. Why they make those changes, we don't know. But happy to have a losers bracket for the NA playoffs here. I think that just more games gives you a little more practice in those scenarios for like the MSIs and the worlds. But yeah, I'm happy to see the losers bracket here in this tournament. We already have Golden Guardian seeded in, and Evil Genius is seeded in. So I believe that would be Golden Guardians' fifth, Evil Genius' sixth seed. So they start down there.
Yeah, and one of the interesting like just kind of notes from the regular season, at the end of the regular season, we ended up with TSM substituting in Haunter into that top lane position where
old guy Haunter coming back.
yeah, where he had been on their academy team throughout the season and ends up coming in at the end of the split to fill into that top lane role. And I'd have to double check how that went. I don't recall. He won one game, lost one game in the two that he played, playing Scion and Cassante. So, I mean, he has better better win percentage than the rest of the TSM team at the end of the split. But yeah, I mean, not
best player on the squad confirmed,
basically. But
nice.
TSM not making it into the playoffs. Definitely not what we would expect from them in terms of long term. Another team right alongside them, just out of the playoffs, was Team Liquid at 8-10 as well. So both those teams missing out, and like you had said, Cloud9 is playing CLG in the first round of the playoffs in the winners bracket. We have FlyQuest versus 100 Thieves in the other winners bracket round. So some good matchups going into the LCS playoffs here this coming week.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty excited to see 100 Thieves and FlyQuest play. I think that'll be a really good series. Into the best of fives for the year. Obviously, I think the phase when North America gets a whole lot better. Well, not better. I should just say more exciting to watch. So some pretty good League of Legends coming up, as well as in the LCK. We've got some playoff matches coming up as well. looking at we've got the KT Rolster versus Live Sandbox, and then Damwon Kia versus Hanwha Life Esports. Just to briefly take a look at each of these matchups. So the Damwon Kia game seeding into Gen G. I'll go back to the top. KT versus Live Sandbox. Expecting a 3-2 in favor of KT. And I'll say that I think the teams are like relatively even strength with no like outlying issues on either side. And then just in that matchup, I think I just rate KT a little bit higher just based on jungle meta. And I think KT's jungler is a little bit better than what Live Sandbox has going on. And then specifically in the bottom lane, I think the Lehens versus Kael matchup is not going to be a place where Live Sandbox is able to draw too much advantage from. And being that the bottom lane is so volatile, it's so important. You're seeing junglers just like funnel down there pretty quickly. We saw Lehens have a brutal performance on a Blitzcrank like earlier in the week. So I think this guy is just going to be really tough to deal with, especially in a best of 5. His champion pool is really going to get to shine. So I think that one's going to go to KT. What do you think?
I would lean KT's way too. I don't know if it will go to a 3-2, maybe a 3-1 for KT, and not that Live Sandbox couldn't take a second game, but I think what we've seen from KT is if they can kind of get the ball rolling, I think that they have performed pretty well in their series that they've had. So if they can get a couple wins together, so if they win, I mean if they win games 1 and 2, I could see them going 3-0, even in a very tight contested series. But I do feel like Live Sandbox has played pretty solidly throughout the season as well to have the opportunity to take off like a game or two. But I do lean towards KT. I think that, like you said, Cuz versus Willer in the jungle, I think is one of the key matchups. I'm looking a little bit at BDD and Closer. I think that is a very tight matchup in terms of what we've seen performance-wise from the two of them throughout the season. So I think whichever way that goes could definitely turn the series one way or another in terms of whether it takes KT 5 games, 4 games, or whatnot. But I do definitely expect KT to come out on top there as well.
Either way, I think it's going to be a pretty exciting series. And then looking down on the other side of the bracket is the Damwon Kia plus Kia, Kia plus Swan versus Hanwha Life Esports. Predicting a 3-1 in this scenario for Damwon Kia. I think across the board, if you look player to player, I think they just have a lot of advantages just like in each role. And then with it being such like a jungle dominant meta where like whatever lane your jungler picks to influence, like kind of whatever lane you've kind of picked ban for, and the jungle is going to try and kick that in. It just seems like the jungler has a lot of influence, and I would give that big time to Canyon for Damwon there. And then honestly, I think the bot side for Damwon as well is going to be disgusting. Deft has just been playing at a really high level this split. So to be fair, I think Damwon's going to take that series pretty handily.
And I think on my end, I am slightly higher on like a 3-2 in this series where I'm not quite sure which way it's going to go.
Okay.
I think Viper has played pretty well, and Zika has started to really show out pretty well at the end of the split as well.
Yep.
Showmaker's had a couple of moments where he's faltered recently, and so I think as a whole, it's gonna be just pretty tight overall. I see it leaning being a little more contested than I think the first series with KT and Live Sandbox would be. I'm leaning still a little bit towards D plus Kia. Like you said, primarily because of Deft and how well he's performed. He's been just on fire the last stretch of the season here. So I think that kind of puts me a little bit more on their side going into this. But I do think that there is a lot more opportunity there for Hanwha Life to take a couple of games off of D plus Kia.
Sure. Well, to be fair, I think that's the beauty of the LCK is a lot of these teams pretty evenly matched, have had pretty similar trajectories throughout the season. So yeah, either way, I think the first round of the LCK playoffs here are going to be quite exciting, feeding into the matches obviously against T1 and Gen G. And then that drops down to a loser bracket as well. But a lot of games coming up here for the LCK. And now, was there anything you wanted to look ahead to for the LPL? I know their playoff starts a little bit later. Were there any notes that you wanted to hit from the LPL?
Not initially. Just the top of the table is still super tight. JD Gaming, Edward Gaming, tied for first and second at 12-3 overall in series. JD Gaming has the tiebreaker, being 26-8 overall in games as opposed to 26-11 for Edward Gaming. LNG, like in the LCK, like the top of the table is very strong. Like the 6th place to 7th place gap is a 4-game gap, or a 4-series gap. That's pretty substantial. Over here in the LCK, or in the LPL, as you get further down, especially because there are so many teams, the differences become very small. Like RNG and Team WE have the same record, very small difference in terms of games won and lost and everything. And that is the difference between 9th, 10th, and 11th with Invictus Gaming there. So with the top 10 going to playoffs, I think it's very tight. We've still got a few matches left to go coming up here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 matches left in the LPL season before we go to official standings for playoffs and all. So there's definitely a little bit of room to shift that around. LNG could end up surpassing EDG if they 2-0 in their matchup coming up. They would jump EDG in the standings and take that second position, just in terms of the tiebreaker being number of losses throughout the split. So
yeah,
I think overall, I'm just looking to see if there are any teams that can kind of play spoiler in the playoffs. I think the most likely culprits are Weibo Gaming and Billy Gaming in that 4-5 slot, but I think a lot of it depends on matchups, which we'll have a bit more perspective on next week on the podcast.
Yeah, and I think some shifting still yet to happen. But yeah, some of the more exciting things are going to be in like where some of the top teams get seeded, and then who in that bottom sector. You know, like you were pointing out, we have a bunch of teams that have like very very similar records. So people could get just like booted out.
Just
depending
by that,
on
like, small margin.
Right. Like a series loss here and one game loss could be pretty tough. So I think a lot of shakeups yet to happen for the LPL. Looking forward to see what the playoff brackets look like, but we'll have more information coming at you next week. But yeah, I think we've got some exciting playoffs coming up here.
Yeah, a lot of excitement leading into MSI, but I know we'll get more into that as the playoffs start to progress. I know you also had some Magic the Gathering you wanted to chat about a little bit, so why don't we hop right in there?
Nice. Yeah, just a little bit different from the normal commander conversation, which is kind of why I wanted to bring it up. So a member of the play group, John, me and him have been talking about a format that I think it officially started about a year ago or so, where they take basically a chunk of time in Magic's like release schedule, and they pick a point and say everything from this date to now is legal, and then they have like a little banned and restricted list. And then, but everything before it is not legal. You can't play it. So the card pool is like X big, right?
Is it still play? Are you talking about still playing with that in the Commander format, or are you talking about that in just like regular, like 1v1?
It's a regular 1v1 format, so 75 card decks where you have a 60 card main deck, a 15 card sideboard, wherein you can play 4 of any one copy of card unless it has restrictions. Um, and he was talking about it. There's a couple events that have been popping up around at some of the local LGSs, and it seems like a pretty cool format. A bunch of the decks in the format are very interesting. And what's fun about it, I had a lot of the pieces for the red blue Phoenix list, the Pioneer list of it. I had a lot of the pieces for already, and with just a few minor shifts would be able to get the deck live and ready to go. So yesterday, because we weren't able to get commander games, me and John planned to hang out. He has a mono white humans list that he was looking to play and bring to events. So I sleeved up my Phoenix list to be able to basically play test with him and just get some practice playing the deck. And I have to say it was really fun looking at like the Pioneer metagame, some of the other decks that are in the format. It just seems really cool. I like the play pattern of the deck that I chose. And yeah, there was just a lot to learn, a lot of fun stuff going on. So it was fun to sit down and play with him. A couple of the key points that I wanted to hit on was how mulligans are different, like meaning like how you choose your hand, where I realized very similar to Commander, mulliganing is an important part of any deck, learning what you need to see in your opening hand, what you don't want to see in your opening hand, and these things. So I think that's an area where one could improve, is looking at the mulligans and saying, nah, maybe I should have been a little more aggressive here. Maybe you're supposed to like dig for this type of interaction piece or whatever. So thinking about the mulligans was fun, and like how to improve that. In that is learning how to do the sideboards. So you get 15 cards that are not in your main deck, that in between each game, you do, best of 3 matches. In between each game, you can take cards out of your main deck and put cards into your main deck from your sideboard. So these will be cards that say like, deal with their graveyard, kill a creature, counter a spell, kill an enchantment, kill an artifact. So depending on what strategy they bring, you can adapt your strategy to their deck with your sideboard to hopefully like make a matchup a little bit better for you.
Do you have all 15 cards just sitting in your hand and you're just like, I'm gonna play this to fuck with that? Like, what? And is the game played in like a best of 5, a best of 3? Like, so it's best of 3. Okay, so
sideboarding happens in between each game, so it's not like a phase of the game. So you would look at your deck. What do you want to take out? And then put in from the sideboard. Most of the time, you're not using all 15 cards.
Okay, so you're just swapping cards out. It's not like a mini game on the side. Okay, right. I was thinking like a mini game on the side where they're like, oh, I didn't like this card, so I'm gonna play this that exiles your blah blah blah, and you can be like, oh well, I've held this card on the side that is instant sorcery that like fucking doesn't let you do that shit. I'm tracking better.
Yeah. So swapping cards in and
Gotcha.
out to get a better matchup.
Okay,
So
that's cool. Like you're picking your champs.
exactly. And then it gives you the opportunity where, let's say, like, they had a really strong strategy in game one. You can say, like, okay, what were the key pieces? What did we see often? You grab everything from your sideboard that deals with that, and then get rid of the things in your main deck that, like, were just totally shit against it. So that's how the matchups can develop. So it was really fun where you could tell he was, and like we were talking about it because like we're trying to learn, and so he was saying like he was sideboarding differently in the different matches in between each game just to learn like what's working better. We were talking about the different pieces that came up that were like, did that feel worse against your deck or did that feel worse? And it's like, oh well, I actually think this shut down more things. So we were getting pretty in the weeds about sideboarding choices and what to do. We found out that the Phoenix versus Mono White Humans is a pretty rough matchup for Phoenix. I have some sideboarding options, but I think I was missing some elements of a good sideboard to where I think if I were to play him again, I may have just a better matchup in general. But based on what I had going on, it was a pretty tough matchup, even when I was sideboarding the correct things.
Gotcha.
So I went 0-3 against him, but we learned a lot, and I think that's what matters. And then I followed up that experience last night. Today, I did some investigation into that deck specifically, watching some, more skilled players than me pilot the deck and talk about the deck. And it made me realize a couple maybe mistakes that I was making.
Okay.
So overall, just learning about the format, learning about this version of the Phoenix deck was just a lot of fun. It was really sweet to play 1v1. It was really sweet to just explore a new thing and learn about it that will inform like later times. Like we want to go to events and like play together and maybe play test and all of these things. So I think it could open just up a whole nother avenue of Magic enjoyment. So I think it was a great start.
Nice, that's awesome. Especially so. One other question I had before I like get into talking about how cool I think that is, but when you use cards from your sideboard, do you have to tell the other person like what you're swapping in and out? Oh, you can just
that's
totally
the beauty of it.
Oh, that's interesting. That's like no, I think that's really cool because that's what I was kind of wondering. Because obviously in League, like in a best of 5 series, like draft to draft, the other team could just have a completely different strategy, and maybe they'll take some of the same champion picks, but they might pick a bunch of different shit too. And okay, that's really cool, but that adds to the fact that I think that it's like cool that you guys got to test that out. I think it's really like I think it's exciting that you guys are having the opportunity to go to like LGSs or local game stores as we plebs call them to be able to play with like other people who are interested in the area and all. Like that's pretty sweet. So very, very cool that you are getting to check that out, and I hope to hear more good words about the opportunities that you guys have had to check things out in the area.
Oh, believe me, the first opportunity that I get, I'll be bringing a Pioneer event little recap for you guys. I'll go through what I think could be some of the interesting elements, but I'll tell you about a very interesting thing to close the conversation on sideboards, and then we can close up with the flavor of the week. So Pro Tour Pioneer, or I guess it was called Pro Tour Phyrexia, recent tournament just happened, like biggest thing in tournament Magic the Gathering. The winning deck, it's called Is It Creativity. So the strategy of the deck, the main card that you're winning with, it's called Indomitable Creativity. You basically look to sack 2 artifacts or 2 creatures to pull out the like a game winning 2 creature combo out of your deck.
Okay.
So you only play those 2 creatures so that when you cast that spell, those are the only 2 you can find. So it ends up being a pretty reliable thing. So the finals between Reed Duke and I forget who the other individual were. Reed Duke was on Is It Creativity. The series went to all 5 games, and the fun thing about that deck is he, depending on the game, sometimes he would side out the combo, and then sometimes he would put it back in. So the other opponent eventually, like, he's going to see your winning line. He's going to go to sideboards and think, oh, okay, so he's playing this. I need to do X, Y, and Z. At a certain point in the sideboard, you can say, yeah, well, I'm taking that out. And so you have like this whole different plan in your sideboard that you can bring in.
See,
Yes.
that's cool because
Yes.
like in Commander, you have to build your contingency plans into the deck,
Right,
And like
right.
but
There's no adaptability.
that which is also like in its own right, like
Yeah.
you're just like, this is the best possible deck that I can play, and if I play it to my maximum, like I can win 7 out of 10 games because
Right.
against this other person. But like also you have the RNG of just like card draw, where you're just like, I could just get fucked because I don't have the right cards into my hand. Like that's just the way it goes. So it's a little bit more like inflexible in Commander, but also like
Right.
still like a really cool format. But I think that's a nice little like tweak with having flexibility. I didn't realize that was in the standard like meta.
Oh yeah. And it's like it creates some very interesting like just kind of match states where you can get a player that kind of steals a game out of nowhere because of the way that they sideboarded and like catches opponent off guard. So recently we saw a great example of a deck having this pivot ability to where they were able to side the combo out and get like and still have advantage. So that deck is in the format as well. So it's just going to be, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. But on to the end of the episode, let's get our people out of here. Aaron, why don't you tell us about your flavor of the week?
Sounds good. I'll keep it pretty short and sweet. But my music this week, with the like warm-ish and sunny-ish weather, I've been yearning for the springtime, and I've just been jamming out to Mac Miller, a lot of Macadelic and Kids and Blue Slide Park, just that fun springtime, like nice weather vibes, mixed in with some other stuff, but I've just, that's one that I always seem to go back to in this kind of time of year. My visual medium for the week is Colleen and I have jumped into, on the recommendation of a couple of our friends, Australian Survivor. So we're big Survivor fans. Australian Survivor, there's a person who posts all the new episodes on YouTube and nothing gets copyrighted because like Australia doesn't care for whatever reason. So we've just been following along on YouTube. And watching those episodes, it's been pretty entertaining. The Australian folks are a bit more blunt and just kind of less concerned about what other people think of them than we see in the American Survivor. In American Survivor, everyone's kind of got to have like a good persona, and everyone's worried about looking good and like not like being an asshole and this and that, where Australian Survivor reminds me of Survivor like back in the day when I've watched since I was a kid, and there used to be people who were like, oh yeah, I'm the bad guy of the season, I'm going to do everything shady that I can to fucking win this. And I was like, oh, I don't like you as a person, but like I like you in this game. Like you're good. And Australian Survivor reminds me of that a little bit, which is fun. So entertaining to watch. But my food this week is a recipe I've made for a while. It's a ramen recipe I found on TikTok a long time ago. Colleen requested it the other day, so I went and whipped it up for us. I think it was yesterday. But it was nice that like I haven't done it in a while, and it was nice to kind of go back to like one of those things that I like made for myself really frequently when I was living on my own. I'm like, oh, this is quick. I can whip it up. It's like I like it, and it was fun to make it again after a little time off. So
hell yeah. Always good to go back to a old reliable, a staple as it were.
Exactly. So, but that is my flavor of the week. Justin, why don't you wrap us up here?
So my music here for the week, I was doing some cruising on the Assetto Corsa mod. So I was listening to Kanye West Donda. Has some pretty good I would say cruising music, like on the front half of the album. It starts getting pretty sad there at the back, so you change it. But the front half is good cruising music. My food here for the week, Sarah thought it'd be a cool idea to do breakfast for dinner. So we had French toast, bacon, and eggs one night for dinner. It was fucking killer.
Love breakfast for dinner.
Yeah, so good. And then my visual medium here for the week, we finished up the Maze Runner trilogy with the third film, Death Cure. Solid ending, definitely heart-wrenching. But yeah, definitely great series. We thoroughly enjoyed it, and it was really fun to go back through the second time. Pick up on things that you may have missed, but yeah, overall it was just a good time, and happy to finish out the trilogy there. But yeah, short and sweet. That's my flavor of the week there, sir.
Nice. That's so I don't know. I can't remember if I ever watched the third movie in that trilogy, so I may have to take myself back and go through those with Colleen. But
I would say it's like big time worth it, honestly.
Yeah. So I'll have to look to do that. But of course, as always, ladies and gents, the end of the flavor of the week means the end of the episode. You can find us on Spotify, Google Podcasts. Check us out on YouTube. Hit us up on Twitter at tall and short of 1, the number 1. But we love putting this out, and so thank you all for listening and spending some time with us this week.
Yeah, just like Aaron said, we really appreciate you spending your time with us. Let your friends know. New episodes come out every Thursday where we're covering esports, Formula One, and any hobby-type related stuff. You guys know the deal. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. This has been another episode, Tall and Short of It. Peace out.
Later.